good evening, everyone. Good evening to the viewers and listeners of TDN Radio, as well as you, of course, those who tune in for this week in interview with your host, Anthony Drago. Welcome, gathering. I always invite you to invite someone to join us on this week in interview, so that the more of us is the merrier, as they say. And I believe in what we share on this weekend interview, that I think as many people as possible would contribute and benefit from listening and joining us. So don't be shy. Share the live with your friends and family. Let them know that this weekend interview is live. And so, as those of you who are tuning in for the first time, welcome. This is Anthony Drago. I'm the host of This Week in Interview, and we do this every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We spend an hour and we talk about contemporary topics, most of the time relevant to Dominica, the region, and we also handle some extra regional as well. Usually on the second Wednesday of the month, we do our Green MAGA series, where Green MAGA meaning to make agriculture great again. However, my co-host on that, my usual guest on that, on that aspect of the program, Mr. Adrian Banis, is otherwise occupied. If you tuned in the last time he was on, he was talking about Banis farms in Dominica doing summer programs for young people to introduce them to farming. For those who are farmers already, to introduce them to the concept of sustainable agriculture, sustainable farming. And so he's caught up getting that started. And so we'll have him on in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, we are, another member of the TDN and This Week in Interview family who hasn't been with us for a little while now. He graciously agreed to come on with me so that I would not be by myself. And of course, every time he comes, we always have a wonderful conversation because he's always so well prepared, and he puts a lot of effort into coming on the program to make sure that whatever he shares with us is substantial and can be substantiated. And speaking of no other person, but my dear friend and brother, Mr. Alvin Thomas. He's no stranger to this week in interview, and there he is. He has been on with us for a little while, so I need to give him a warm welcome back. He's been sharing his knowledge and his influence far and wide, but we're happy that he came back home and he's with us tonight. So, Alvin, a very warm welcome to you um, back on this weekend interview.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you very much. A pleasure to be back. For at one point I said, well, maybe my persona non grata letter has an expiration date, and it has expired as of tonight. So thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here and to share with you and to share with your listeners. Some of the information and the issues at hand, and to give a different perspective of it. And I hope at the end of it, persons become more informed and more engaged. At the end of the day, if you get the information and then you don't take action based on the information, then, we have not completed the entire cycle of the
Right,
process.
right.
So it's always a pleasure to be back, and I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation this evening.
For sure. So those of you who may have come on to the fold after the last time Alvin was on, by way of brief introduction, I introduced him as an entrepreneur. He has a business um, with his sons called Opti Precision, and you can check me out for the information. With your prescription, they can customize. I say customize because you get really personal service with them. They can make your glasses very fashionable prescription sunglasses, non-prescription sunglasses, and of course prescription glasses with the full works, transitions, tinted, polarized, all of the good stuff, and they do it and ship it back to you. And of course, I'm familiar with the business. I'm familiar with the many satisfied customers that he has. So if you are in the market for your second pair or your first pair or a fashion pair or driving glasses, whatever your needs, and they do contact lenses as well.
Yes, we do.
They do contact lenses. They have, by the way, they do have an outlet in Roseau, Dominica. So just check them out. The name of the business is Opti Precision. So if you Google that or you go on any one of the social media, you'll be able to find them.
In
Also,
Dominica, it's called Opti Shop. In Dominica, it's Opti
in
Shop.
Dominica's Opti Shop. Okay. Also, Alvin is a former civil servant with a lot of experience in the Dominica, working in Dominica public service. As a matter of fact, he was the general secretary of the Public Service Union for a long time. So he has a full range of knowledge and experience. He acted as a postmaster general in Dominica for a while, and also he was the assistant secretary in the Ministry of Tourism. That is just a small part of his resume. Former president of the JCs, he's a senator of he's a JCI senator. So that tells you that he's been involved in community work, building up of young people as leaders, and so on. So with that, I invited Alvin to come on tonight because there's a lot going on in Dominica, but specifically in the week preceding this program, we saw a letter from the Prime Minister of Antigua, Gaston Brown, where he informed his constituents, the Antiguan and Barbudan people, that he had received communication from the European Union regarding Antigua citizens by investment programs. That's where you sell passports to folks and for a certain amount of money, and that gives them citizenship into the island in exchange for investing in either housing program or some other program. The countries, or some countries in the OECS have been doing that for the past several years, and there has been a lot of concern about the methodology that they follow. To qualify and to give out those citizenship, because the attraction that of those passports is that people who live in countries that have difficulty or challenges traveling through Europe and and the United States, North America, and so on, Canada, that second passport facilitates them to travel rather than travel on their first home passport. But the EU has written a strong letter to these governments, because Gaston Brown said it wasn't just Antigua, it was the other islands in the OECS who have this program, that they need to phase that program out by 2028. And so Alvin has had his pulse and following that program from its inception all the way through to present day, and I think he is well qualified to talk about that issue. And so I brought him on so that we can discuss it. Have you? What about you? Have you heard about that development, and what are your feelings? Have you even thought about it? What impact is it going to have on the people of the Caribbean, those who have citizens by investments? So, Alvin, with that intro, I'm going to hand it over to you to probably fill in the gaps, or to make it more, uh, to lay the background against which we're going to have our discussion tonight, with that looming deadline where the citizen by investment program, if we take it on face value, and assume that that's what's actually going to happen, the sunsetting of that program in 2028. What are your thoughts around that whole program, and so on?
Thank you, Tony. Thank you again. Let me say it is a pleasure to join you this evening and to have that conversation. And thank you for the kind words that you expressed at the start of the program. I appreciate that immensely. Let me say, maybe I will begin by um, putting into perspective the program
Mm-hmm.
itself, because a lot of folks in the region and the citizens of the OECS in particular hear about the Citizen by Investment program and maybe does not have a good grasp or understanding as to what this is all about. I mean, you hear the government side of it where they say, well, the program provides for supporting various infrastructural programs in the islands, and therefore, if the program were to be suspended, it would mean a serious blow to the economies. But to the extent to which the average citizen fully understands and grasps what it is involved, um, I will paint, and as I said, give a brief perspective. Um, they let me start with the islands first of all, who are in the program, which maybe most of your listeners are aware. But there is St. Kitts and
Mm-hmm.
Nevis, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, um, and St. Lucia. Okay, these are the islands. St. Vincent is not in the program, although the newly elected Prime Minister Godwin Friday indicated some intention of wanting to start off a program in St. Vincent. Now, in terms of the countries that I just mentioned, St. Kitts, Dominica, Antigua, Grenada, St. Lucia, um, St. Kitts earned its independence in 1983. Okay, September 1983. Dominica got theirs November 3rd, 1978. And keep those dates in mind as I'm referring them. Antigua got their independence November 1, 1981. Grenada, February 7th, 1974. And St. Lucia, February 22nd, 1979. Okay, the the program, which is now referred to as the CBI, and the precursor to that program, when that program started in Dominica back in the 1990s, I will give a little perspective on that as well. It was referred to as the Economic Citizenship Program. And then, of course, with the restructuring of the program in Dominica's case, it was then referred to as the Citizen by Investment Program. Now, in St. Kitts' case, they began their program back in 1984. Okay? Now, bear in mind, I told you St. Kitts gained its independence in 1983, and they began that program in 1984 in St. Kitts. So you're talking about 42 years of that program in St. Kitts. In Dominica's case, that program started off in 1993 under the administration of Freedom Party, Dame Eugenia Charles. So Dominica has been in the program about 33 years thereabout, and they they started it about 15 years after independence, okay, in 1993. In the case of Antigua, Antigua started off their program in 2013, which is about 13 years ago since they started the program, and well over some 32 years after their independence. In the case of Grenada, they started theirs as well in 2013, which is 13 years ago. And in the case of St. Lucia, they only started their program 11 years ago in 2015. Okay? So, as I indicated, the program as was engineered in by the Dominican Freedom Party in the early 1990s was called the Economic Citizenship Program. And what basically the program was established against the backdrop of the economic challenges and was intended as a means of attracting foreign capital while minimizing the need for additional public borrowing. That was the intention of the program back then when it was conceived by the Dominican Freedom Party. Um, I would venture to say it may have been a similar approach with respect to the other countries, in particular St. Kitts. And the principal reasoning behind the program in the case of Dominica, one could summarize that to say that the Dominica's economy was heavily dependent on agriculture, particularly bananas. And by the early 1990s, there were growing concerns about that. You remember, Tony, the vulnerability of a single crop economy, that being bananas. And of course, the decline in preferential access for Caribbean bananas to the European market. Remember the intervention of the WTO saying that the Caribbean islands or the banana producing islands should not get preferential treatment. And as a result, that had some negative impact on the banana producing countries of the sub-region. And then, of course, added to that, you had external economic shocks. In the 90s, you had the some, economic crises here and there, upheavals, and that had some impact on the region. As you know, most of them were coming out and maybe young from independence. And then, coupled with that, you had limited domestic investment opportunity. So as a result, the government sought alternatives to alternative to non-traditional source, as they call it, non-traditional source of revenue. Okay, and and one one way of doing that was to attract that foreign capital by the way of this economic citizenship program. And it was expected, of course, that the funds would help to support national development projects, improve infrastructure, um, help to stimulate private sector investment, and to strengthen government's own finances. Okay, so that kind of gives you a broad overview. Additionally, I think what it was intended to was to reduce dependency on borrowing. So international loans, commercial borrowing, increased taxation. So that was basically the thing. Now, of course, the Freedom Party, as I said, introduced that in 1993. They lost the election 2 years after that. In 1995, the United Workers' Party came in and they continued the program, re-engineered it a bit to suit, I guess, their own policy objective. And as I said, the program, even its own naming and so changed. Let me
Right.
just back up a bit to say that when the program was initiated by the Dominican Freedom Party, all of the revenue generated from the program was coming to Dominica in the Dominica's Treasury Consolidated Fund, completely different to what obtains today. I think it is important to note one criteria, one area that is important to note is in the case of all, I would say all the countries mentioned, that non-tax revenue, which is what it is referred to for purposes of government budgeting and reporting, is referred to as a non-tax revenue, meaning that it is not the same like the license that people pay, income tax, or the fees that people might pay, which are considered tax revenue. This is a non-tax revenue. It represents, in some cases, as high as 60% of the recurrent revenue. So, in other words, to break it down, let's say you have a business and you're supposed to collect fees or dues or revenue. On every dollar you collect, 60% or 60 cents of that dollar is being generated from that program, which is the CBI. The
Right.
other 40 cents comes from, you might say, as I said, the taxes or the dues.
So it's as if
So
you have a shop with as if you
go
run
ahead.
a shop,
Mhm.
and in your shop you're selling bread.
Yes,
And when you count your money, you say, "Oh, every $100 I make, $60 is from bread.
yes,
It's from selling bread. The rest of
ye-
the things
yes, yes.
is 40%. But
Right, right,
by selling
right.
bread, it brings
So,
60% of my revenue."
right. So So that in itself, Tony, and in some cases, like even St. Kitts and Nevis, it represents about 40 to 50%. St. Lucia is not as high as Dominica, so as well as Grenada. So what that says is that there's a heavy dependency on that revenue. So let me go back to where we started earlier in the conversation. What that means to the average man on the street. It means, therefore, that if government is projecting or budgeting, say, for example, $600 million in terms of the revenue to be collected, to spend towards their projects, their goods and services, their upkeep of their hospital, their roads, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
It means that out of that 600 million, do 60% of that. Do the maths. You're better in maths than me. More than half of that 600 million is
Right.
going to come out of CBI.
Wow.
So if by some whatever it is circumstance that you are not able to generate that revenue of 300 plus million, 400 million out of that 600 million to pay for your services at the hospital, to take care of your infrastructure, to pay your public servants, to provide medication at the hospital, to provide supplies at the school, to pay your people who provides goods and services to the government. Can you imagine what kind of negative impact it's going to have on the economy and the people? In Dominica's case, for example, the CBI, I'm sure, pays the wages, salaries and wages of the the NEP workers. Okay, so if government now has to make up a shortfall of that 40 or 50% of that revenue, how do you think that they are going to be able to pay the NEP workers and the public servants and make sure the China Friendship Hospital is fully equipped and staffed, make sure the road to Pidit Savan is surfaced, make sure the deteriorating school in Tetmon is repaired, make sure that the printing supplies and the paper that the ministry needs is provided for, make sure the policemen have the uniforms that they need, make sure the fire services have this. How are they going to do that?
Right.
So
Wow.
herein lies the problem. And therefore, how many of our average citizen understands it like that? Now, the government comes and they paint that fantastic picture of the CBI has been able to generate and build houses and what you call it, hotels, which I will come to at some point in our conversation, because what they did, like I said, when the program started back in 1993 under the Freedom Party, the emphasis wasn't as it is under this current administration. And what they did, they restructured the program and have what is called a housing option. A housing option, which is where they were able to provide and build all of these houses they did for the people of Dominica. Now, I'm not opposed to that, but I'm opposed to the manner in which it is done. And
Right.
then, of course, we have the hotels, and that too is another story. I mean, we do have some success stories that came out of the program, like Jungle Bay. I'm not sure if
Secret
Secret
Bay.
Bay is part
Mm-hmm.
of that, but you also have some very dismal stories that several hotels that have started and are yet to be completed. They're just sitting there like white elephants in the country.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, you have another situation where the one at Portsmouth, what is called again? I think it's now called
The
the
Moroccan
no, no,
Hotel.
no, no, no. The one that's operational in Portsmouth. It started off as
It's like
Ken,
Las
Ken
Kepinski, but that's not the
Kempinski,
name right
but
now.
it's
Uh-huh.
now changed, right? Now,
Right.
even that particular hotel, you heard, and I'm not saying it, the records are there. It was filed in the New York court when this matter came into court, when one of the guys challenged his cut from the CBI sale of passport. One guy walked away with what, 10 or 15 million dollars. Okay. So
Okay.
that
So
is a
Alvin, what I want to do is I want to. So the first part of it where we explain to folks what the program is,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if we look at Dominica's case, it was started under the Freedom Party administration under Demu Junius Charles as Prime Minister, and it was
Mm-hmm.
called the Economic Citizenship Program. The
Yes.
United Workers' Party came into office in 1995 to pretty much 2000, and they continued the program. And then the Labour Party came into power in 2000, and they've been in government now for 26 years, and
Mm-hmm.
they've evolved the program quite a bit.
Yes.
Where is the naming of the program significant, or the changes that came with the naming? Like when it started as an economic citizenship program. Most countries have an economic citizenship program. Ho- what's the
Well,
difference
I will.
between that and
I
and
will.
and, and the way it's operated right now?
I will say yes to both the questions that you just asked. One, the naming it just as name because it was called the Economic Citizenship Program. Bear in mind,
Hmm.
the main, the first naming in there is economic. And as I explained earlier, those were the intentions at the time in 1993. Boy, we need to have a situation so we don't depend on a one crop. We need to stimulate the economy. We need to do private sector investment. All of that stuff needs to be done. Okay.
Right. Hmm.
Then it came and they changed it to citizen by investment. So the underlying word there, in my own view, and someone may disagree with me, is investment.
Investment. Uh-huh.
So from the point of view of the individual who is contributing or acquiring that citizenship is doing an investment.
Hmm.
Anyone that does an investment expects a certain return on his or her investment.
Right.
If you look at it on the other way around, where it was called the Economic Citizenship Program, the emphasis was more from the government end. I'm going to give you something that would help stimulate my economy, and this is what I intend to do in my economy, and I will provide some citizenship. Of course, there would be some parameters and some conditions in terms of how that goes about. What have also happened is that all of that have changed, like I said earlier. There has been a lax in due diligence. We don't have time to go over that tonight. It's a fact because even the heads of government, as recent as July 10th, last week,
Hmm.
agreed to that's an area that they agreed that they have to improve upon. So the due diligence has been questionable. The question of the funds, there's a matter before the courts right now in terms of the accountability of the funds. And that's another area that we can discuss as we look at where the program is and in response to the head's statement that they issue dated July 10th. Let me just issue a disclaimer there in that I issued an article on that particular statement because when I read that, I find that was so alarming that I decided that I'm going to express a position on it. So,
Hmm.
so to answer your question, yes, um, the structure of the program has changed, the naming of the program has changed, the intent of the program has changed, and the program is one whereby the government now just sit back and they had a largesse of monies, and the monies just keep coming in, and very little apart from the hotels that we have in Dominica and the what you call it and the housing. Not much else can be shown. I mean, they talk about geothermal. Geothermal, from what I understand, that's borrowing, that's direct borrowing for that 25 or 50 million or 200 million, whatever money that was spent on that. Um, the airport, they say, is being financed by the CBI. Again, there is no transparency or proof on that to show, well, hey, this is how much money out of the CBI that's gone into it, and these are the return. I mean, I'm not aware that any Dominican can go anywhere and pull on any government website or any government office and look at the plans of the airport, what it looks like, what it will look like when it finished, how much money has been spent to date, how much money that was put into it out of the CBI. So these are questions that need to be asked. But I think fundamental in all of that, Tony, is the fact that
Hmm.
they you referred to it in your opening remarks, that the EU now is giving all of these countries an ultimatum. And they're saying to them in no uncertain terms, come June 1st, 2028, you have to bring these programs to an end. That was the ultimatum given by the EU. Okay? And what we see happening now is all of those leaders of the region running all over the place like headless roosters. Because in the case of Dominica, 2028 will be approaching the 50th anniversary of Dominica as an independent nation. 2028.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have a situation where 50% of our recurrent revenue comes from a program like the CBI, and we're not able to replace that 50% non-tax revenue within the next 24 months, do you anticipate or do you foresee what kind of independence, 50-year independence, or what exactly we'll be celebrating as a country having been independent for 50 years? Now,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
now what, let me just conclude before you come in. The heads of the OECS met in Dominica on July 10th, 2026. That's just a couple of days ago. And that meeting was chaired by the Prime Minister, Roosevelt Scarrett. In attendance was the Prime Minister, Philip Pierre of St. Lucia, the Prime Minister, Gaston Brong of Antigua, Dick Mitchell of Grenada, Terence Drew, Prime Minister of St. Kitts Nevis, and also in attendance, Godwin Friday, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. As I said, the St. Vincent do not have a program in place as we speak. And they issued a statement, Mr. Drago. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read the statement, but for those of you listening tonight who have not read the statement, I urge you to read the statement. Take some time and read the statement. And I will make a few fundamental observations. The mere fact that these 6 prime ministers took time off from their schedule and met in Dominica suggests to me, one, I'll give that to them, that this is a matter of serious importance that required a meeting and a discussion. There were 6 prime ministers in Dominica on the 10th of July discussing this matter. So clearly, they recognize the importance of this matter to warrant a meeting among themselves, chaired by the Prime Minister, Roosevelt Scarrett. But what came out of that meeting in terms of the statement, I must say, was, in my mind, disheartening, to say the least, when you read the statement yourself. And therefore, I responded to that, as I said, and I issued some comments on that. Let me just quote very briefly a section of paragraph 11 of the statement.
Paragraph 11, so they issued a
11,
very extensive.
a very lengthy, oh yes, it's a very extensive statement.
Hmm.
At paragraph 11, among other things, they said, quote, recognizing the importance of preserving economic stability and development gains achieved through citizen by investment programs, the heads of government have agreed that discussions with the European Union should also encompass opportunities for enhanced development cooperation, strategic investment partnerships, climate resilience financing, listen to those words, economic diversification initiative, and other appropriate support measures capable of strengthening long-term economic resilience and facilitating any future arrangements that may be agreed between the parties, unquote. Yes, about the underlying words there. Strategic investment partnership, climate resilience financing, economic diversification initiative. They're saying that these are important to them. Now, let me say to you, in terms of Dominica, over the period 20, I would say 2015, 2025, Dominica generated somewhere in the region of 4 to 6 billion US dollars. Billion with a B. Let's take it on the low end and even say 4 billion. That's US. That's about what? 12 billion EC dollars over the
Around there,
20,
yeah.
over 15, over a 10-year period, 2015 to 2025. I'm sorry. Let me back up. That is St. Kitts. St. Kitts, my bad. St. Kitts did 4 billion to 6 billion US dollars. St. Kitts. Dominica did 2.5 to 3.5 billion US dollars. Antigua did somewhere around 1.2 to 1.8 billion US dollars. Grenada did somewhere around 1 billion to 1.5 billion. And St. Lucia, bear in mind, I say St. Lucia has only been in the program for 11 years, did somewhere around 400 million to 700 million US dollars. And these guys are saying now, with that kind of money that was generated over that period, the EU now must facilitate them with must facilitate them in the areas that have identified, that is the area that they have identified, that is strategic investment partnership, enhanced development cooperation, climate resilience financing, economic diversity initiative. My question is, when you get to the table of the EU, which you're basically saying to the EU, help bail us out, because if you tell us to stop this thing, we can't stop this thing because it's going to cause extreme chaos for us in the region. What are you coming to the table with?
I need to do a commercial break. So let's take a pause. Because I think this is the crux of the matter, right? We there was the islands were successful in generating revenue, but they seem not to have taken it seriously. So uh, I want to know. Okay, my producer is telling me skip the break. So we've gotten the green light to continue, right?
Yes.
So what I want to know is they've identified what 5 areas where they would go to the EU for cooperation.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's just a small part of the statement.
I
But
know,
like I
right?
said,
But
yeah.
but but
So
but
they
but so
recognize, yeah, the areas. Let me give you the areas again.
uh-huh.
Heads of government have agreed that discussion with European Union should also encompass, opportunities for enhanced development cooperation. That's one. Enhanced development cooperation, strategic investment partnership. That's two. Climate resilience financing. That is three. Economic diversification initiative. That is four. And other appropriate support measures capable of strengthening long-term, you hear the word, long-term economic resilience and facilitating any future arrangement that may be agreed upon.
All right. So I want to just let's break this down to see what we're talking about. In terms of the numbers that you were talking about, if we average it, say it's over the last 10 years, all right?
Mm-hmm.
These islands have generated what is it, 4 billion in terms of St. Kitts, 2 billion with Dominica, and say with St.
Yeah,
Kitts, actually that's seven, almost 10 billion US dollars.
yeah, yeah,
That's
certainly.
that's on average $1 billion a year that comes
Yes.
into the region, right?
Mm-hmm.
The EU has put them on notice and given them 2 years. So let us say they have 1 year, right? Before the program starts ramping down and people start saying, it doesn't make sense for me to buy this anymore because the privilege I'm buying it for is going away in a year time. That means that even just in the economic citizenship program itself, they're looking at generating $1 billion in the next year. Why can they look at the same things that they're going to go to the European Union for and say, you know what, guys, look, we have the opportunity to bring in an additional $1 billion to the region in the next year, in 1 year. Let's look at those five
Well, I'm not
areas.
sure they might be able to bring that, Tony.
Well, no,
I
but
don't say they might be able to
theoretically,
bring a
because
billion in the next.
the-
So, yeah,
theoretically,
right.
right? Because they've done it
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
have the experience. So let's see. Okay. My point is
right.
that nowhere in the document do I see these governments are saying, listen, hard times are coming. Let us see what we can generate from the program. And the little money we generate from the program, this is what we're going to try to do with it. I just get it started. So when the European Union, if we go to them and ask them to assist us, they can see that we at least we're late, but we started something, and we can tell them we generate $1 billion of our own. Can you give us a couple 100 million to go with it? And that's US
Right.
dollars.
Yeah.
So again, we don't see no type of responsibility, accountability, ownership of the development of the region being assumed by the governments of the region, and that is sad.
Yeah.
To me,
No,
to me that's the saddest thing.
no, you're right. You're right, Tony. And I think what is so disheartening about this whole thing is that here you had a situation where these countries were generating significant revenue from this program. And like they said, they never save for rainy days. Now,
Hmm.
had they, for example, put just a 5% of that monies aside, or 10% into what one might consider or call maybe a development fund, an OECS regional development fund, sovereignty fund, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
then you could now say to the EU, look, over the period of that program, St. Kitts, as I said, has been in the program for the last 42 years thereabout. Um, they could then say to the EU, look, during the period we've been having that program, we have established a fund of X amount, and this is what we have in our fund. And we recognize you want us to stop the program. But in order to do that, you would have to help support us or supplement the fund that we have. And that fund, and on a
Right.
regional level, because the point remain, unlike fortunate for us within the OECS, we have a structure in place. We have a common currency. We have the OECS regional cooperation arrangement. The EC dollar is stable, pegged to the US dollar. We have an Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. The guys could have easily set up a development fund, a regional development fund, putting, as I said, a certain percentage aside from the CBI earnings, because they're all doing the same program. Now, the fact that they can come together to take a common approach towards the program, why was it they could not have come together previously and take a common approach towards revenue generated for the program and to deal with stuff like disaster preparedness and recovery? Each one of the island faces disaster, hurricane, floods, you name it, or a climate resilience project, or renewable energy investment, food security, regional transportation, education and research, emergency fiscal support following hurricane or natural disaster. All of these are areas that a fund of that nature could have financed had they put aside something for rainy days. Because that's what you do. That's what you do, Tony. So it's like you having this kid out there making all that money, squander the money, and now you realize his mortgage is foreclosing, his house may be damaged or whatever, and he's coming to you now and say, you know what, Daddy, I mean, you have to help me, you know. I have to make sure the house fixed. I have to do this, I
Yeah,
have to do that.
if you don't help
So
me,
so Daddy,
if you don't help me,
you can't leave
I
me on
going
the
to be
road, you know.
homeless. Yeah, I going to
You
be
know I'll be
homeless if you don't help
homeless.
me.
So
Yeah,
if you don't do that, you leave me homeless. So you now have to deliver. Except to say, well, you know what, Daddy, I made some errors, but over the period, with all what's going on, I saved some money. So I have $200,000 saved aside. But in order to get me back on my feet, I'm going to need 400,000. So can you help me with another 100,000?
right,
That was a conversation you can have.
right.
You could say, okay, let's have a conversation. But nowhere in that statement that they issued on July the 10th are they saying that this is what we are bringing to the table. So my question to the heads of government: what exactly you want the EU to do for you? What exactly you want the EU to do for us in the region? When you say to the EU that you want opportunity to enhance development cooperation, what are you talking about? What kind of development cooperation? When you say you want strategic investment partnership, what exactly? Break it down. What are you looking for? You talk about climate resilience financing. Resilience is a word that is being flaunted all over the place. And the key one there, economic diversification initiative. That is the key one. One of the underlying principles when the Freedom Party started that back in 1993 was private sector investment development. How much of the CBI monies can be shown? And I stand corrected if someone can show me and point it to me. How much of that went into private sector investment? Forget the hotels for the time being. Forget the hotels for the time being. How much of that went into private sector investment? And on top of that, again, using Dominica as a reference point, as we speak right now, Tony, the government has a public debt of close to 1.6, $1.7 billion. Debt.
That
Public
not
debt of
so
so
not
many
not
regions.
not even the debt they take care of with the windfall. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, what's unfortunate is that we happen to have a couple good examples of what could be done with a private sector partnership with the CBI program. The
yes.
two hotels, the two successes that we can point to, Secret Bay, which I understand. I'm not 100% certain, but I understood that there was some use of CBI funds in establishing that, and certainly with Jungle Bay, those were partnerships that were done with Dominicans, and those partnerships has resulted in successful enterprises that are world-class recognized facilities that bring revenue into the country, as opposed to the other activities where it was done with foreigners and
Right,
mostly with foreign labor and very little employment locally. And we are still learning that the ownership of those facilities are not largely Dominican ownership. They are
right.
investor ownership. You know, I don't know if
Yes,
that's the case for Secret Bay or Jungle Bay, but certainly when I was in Dominica, I went to Jungle Bay and there are Dominicans working there.
right.
A lot of you can see a lot of the produce that they use that is used there for meals come from the local farmers and the local um, people who people who livestock farmers, as well as vegetables and provisions and stuff like that. The decorations, a lot of those things, a lot of we see a lot of I saw a lot of skill transfer. So there were people training the young people how to do massages and yoga,
Mm-hmm.
and the chefs and so on. So we have examples of
Right.
how the citizenship by investment program could have been successfully deployed.
Yes. No, you are right, Tony. And that is the irony of the whole thing. And like I said earlier, I mean, Jungle Bay Resort is a success story.
Hmm.
I mean, in terms of the results that you see now, from the CBI. But that's just one. And what's the other one? Secret Bay. But even this Trump project that this currently have, that Trump or whatever
Trump.
they call
Uh-huh.
it, yes. Do you know that was again being financed by CBI funds? Okay, we sold passports to do that project. And do
Hmm.
you know, Tony, that the owners of that project, and it blows my mind when I mention it, because I still, for the life of me, cannot fathom how possibly or how a government could sit at a table, or a representative of the Dominican government, and sign an agreement like that. These guys have a 999-year lease on lands in our natural area,
Or
historical,
forest
whatever they
reserves,
call it,
national
forest reserve.
parks. Yeah. Hmm.
The guys, Tony, do you hear what I told you? The guys have a 999-year lease.
A 99-year lease.
Not a 99, 999. Are you hearing me now? Not
That must be a
99.
typo.
I hope it is a typo. They have a
That's
999-year lease. So you need to do some research on that. I'm serious. I heard it, and I questioned it from a source that I got it, and I said, no, it's an
and
error.
it's not their money. They didn't come with money.
Right? Okay. The guys who did the geothermal have a 25-year lease agreement on that. 25 years. So when the country will be celebrating 75 years as an independent nation, thereabout, somewhere in that region, that's when they will say, well, we hand over this project back to you.
And by that time, the well
Okay?
will pretty much have exhausted its useful life, because the geothermal
Exactly. I'm
wells,
not a
they exhaust.
geologist. That's not my
The,
area. So I'm not going to venture into that area.
no,
But
no,
all I will
no.
say is
But
that
I mean, it is well
25
known.
years is a long time.
Geothermal is
Yeah.
not a new technology. You know that when you do the wells, they have a lifetime. They have a
Right.
lifespan.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. But here is what, for example, had these guys in Dominica's case, for example, use some of that funds from the CBI, we could have had a thriving water industry business.
Yeah.
We could have taken that money, invest in a proper water industry business, build some dams, um, do some water bottling, some water export, and be the country within the OECS and the Caribbean exporter of waters. St. Lucia recently had a water situation, and I believe they were trying to get water, I believe from Trinidad or us. They had a water problem.
Barbados was trying to get water from
Barbados
Panama or
has a water
something.
problem as well. St. Martin. And we have abundance of water. I mean, you worked in the water industry, so you understand that even better than I do. So had we taken, let's say, $700
No,
or
no, no, no,
500
no.
million,
No,
I
no,
don't
no, no,
know. As
no.
I say, not my area. So I'm just saying,
10, 10
at
million, 10 million
10
euros will
million,
be more than enough.
okay, we could have established a thriving water business. So now that the CBI is going away, we would have had a water industry up and running. What about agriculture? How much of it have we really seriously invested in agriculture
Wow.
and small businesses that you could say, well, okay, we now have a couple industries or factories producing vetiver, bay oil, castor oil, what you name it, pineapples. We're shipping out pineapples. We're shipping out anthurium lilies every week to the Virgin Islands and in the floral business. So we have lost the opportunity. And in the article that I wrote, I wrote in response to the heads of government statement, I made it quite clear. I concluded by borrowing from a quote from the, what you call it, the leader of the opposition of St. Kitts and Nevis, who is also the premier of Nevis. Um, Mr. What's his name now? I'll get his name for you. A.G. Brantley is the leader of the opposition of St. Kitts and Nevis and the premier of Nevis. He issued an article himself on the same CBI. I think it was dated July the 8th, if I'm not mistaken. And the title of his article was "The Death of Citizenship by Investment in the OECS." That was his title. Okay. And he ended his article by saying, one thing I'm certain in all of this, there is no one who is coming to save the Caribbean. So the EU is not coming to save us. America is not coming to save us. The British, nobody's come to save us. You in the Spice Island must save yourself. At the time he was addressing, I believe, one of the political parties in Grenada. We of the OECS must save ourselves. The Caribbean region must save itself. And I included, surely the European Union will not be able to save us either. Okay? Because we saw what happened with our bananas. Okay? When our bananas was going through the challenges that it did with the position taken by the WTO and insisted that we should not receive preferential treatment to export our bananas into Europe, there should be an open playing field. Nobody saved us. As a result, bananas went away gradually. One of the major revenue earning export that we had in Dominica, St. Lucia, Grenada, and the islands. And nobody saved us. And the same thing is going to happen this time around. And I believe, if you ask me, we have missed the opportunity with the kind of revenue that I said, the kind of revenue that was generated by the CBI. We have missed an opportunity of being self-reliant, and now hoping that we can go into a discussion with the EU and say to the EU, you know, guys, if you take away the CBI, if we stop the CBI, we won't survive. So please help us, we can survive. That's not going to happen. And it's really unfortunate. And that is why I began by saying the extent to which our citizens of the region have a clear understanding of what's going on. Because when that 40 to 50% non-tax revenue is no longer available, it means when that Dominican walk into the China Friendship Hospital and he's told, even now with the CBI, they were having shortages. When the CBI is finally gone away and he's told that, you know, sorry, we are short on supplies. When the NEP workers were short, when the houses that have been built for the citizens of Dominica, when maintenance wouldn't be able to be done on them because there's no money in the budget to maintain the building, to fix the sewerage, to fix the roof. When these monies have gone and we don't have a replacement because we don't have any productive sector generating sufficient revenue to support that shortfall, then we're in a chaos.
Well, I know. So, I don't, you know,
You don't even know where to start.
I it
You
is
didn't
sad.
realize it was as dismal as
No, no,
that.
no. I do. The thought that's going through my head is that governments are not dropped on us from the sky or from heaven. Governments are a reflection of the people. They say people get the government that they deserve, right?
Yeah,
I'm not being cynical, but I'm saying that there is something wrong with our sub-region if we have 6 prime ministers come to a conference to address something that they consider to be serious, and the only solution they seem to propose is to look outside the region and say, help us. If you don't help us, we're going to sink.
yeah,
That is a poor reflection on us
yes.
as Caribbean people, as citizens of the OECS countries.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly do we take seriously? if that is the if that is the kind of leadership that we have with the governments. It's not one government to say, well, you know, they elected this guy and this guy he was popular, he was charismatic, and he win. You know, we replace him next time around. Six of them,
Yeah,
and what came out was what you read the excerpt from. So the challenge I have for the audience is to really sit down and to cast our mind forward 5 years, 10 years from now. If we continue not to demand better performance from our governments, where will the region be? Will we even still have that spot in the world that we can call our own? Or will our children inherit a situation where they have to go and work as servants, hand and foot, to people that will take the magnificent real estate that our ancestors handed down to us with their blood and their sweat, literally with blood and sweat and brutalization. So we as Caribbean people need to get out of this carnival mentality. Okay, our part of our personality is to have a good time, but can should that be the only thing that we take seriously? Can we look at this squarely and say, no, 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 this is serious. We need to demand more from our governments. If anybody wants to know what happens to an economy when it suddenly loses 60% of its revenue generating activity, go to Portsmouth in Dominica. Portsmouth lost Ross University. And when you walk through the place is a ghost town. The economic activity in Portsmouth is non-existent. With the loss of the CBI, the impact is going to be similar, except it's going to be on a national and a regional scale. So, Alvin,
absolutely.
you
No,
know,
absolutely.
we've gone past our 9 o'clock, so let's bring this discussion to a conclusion. It's not totally hopeless, but we need to act with urgency, right?
Extreme urgency, I will say.
Mm.
Extreme urgency, because, you know, I mean, the question that need to be put to all of these heads is that what measures did you put in place? As I said, while the going was good, while you were generating all that revenue from the
Mm-hmm.
CBI,
Mm-hmm.
what measures were put in place for rainy days in the event that something were to happen where this non-tax revenue, which makes up 40 to 50% of your overall revenue, if that were to drop or something happened, what measures did you put in place to alleviate that? That's the question. And even I mean, like I said, that statement that the issue is so weak, so empty. They concluded their statement by saying any future framework should be guided by the principles of proportionality. Proportionality, what do you mean? That the EU must you okay, proportionality, you put 10, the EU you put 10. Is that what they're saying? I don't know. Maybe they can
Well,
explain
like,
that.
I guess what they're saying is that the CBI brought $10 billion to the region in the last 10 years, and now you want us to stop. So, are you going to give us 10 billion in the next 10 years? I guess
Partnership.
I guess that's what they
Yeah,
mean by proportionality.
exactly. They say partnership, shared responsibility, and that's another key word. Shared responsibility. So they're saying to the EU that the framework, the future framework, shared responsibility. What responsibility did these heads have to the people of the region? And sustain development. The heads of government reaffirmed their readiness to engage constructively in this process and express their confidence that through dialogue and cooperation, balanced and durable solutions can be achieved. And again, that is just words, playing on words. These guys had no vision. The Prime Minister of Dominica the Honorable Roosevelt Skerritt, over the last years that we've had the CBI program, and he seemed to have generated more revenue. His administration over the last 25 years generated more revenue out of this program than any other administration. Had no vision, okay? And it's no use he says, well, we build houses for the people. Yes, you build houses for the people, but building a house for the people, it doesn't just start there and end there. Again, if I may use an analogy, it's like your son coming to you and he say, Daddy, I want a car. And you give him the car. But he can't even pay the license for the car. He can't register the car. He can't even put gas in the car. The tires are all bald and he can't change the tires. But he has a car. He can boast, so Daddy gave me a car. But when the car needs new tires, who's going to replace the tires? The car needs to go in for servicing. Who's going to pay for that? Because these folks have the houses, but from what you and I know, they don't have title to the house. They don't pay anything for the house. The house has to be maintained. It has to be upkept. There's utilities. All of that stuff goes to the housing. So, I mean, what is it to show? And let me tell you one other thing that I will say just as I conclude. There are three areas that are high risk for what is called money laundering and siphoning of money. Three areas. One is real estate. Two is fine arts. Three is horses. These are the three areas trading that it's vulnerable when it comes to laundering and thinking of money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I will end by saying, Tony, we are in a very, very, very bad state. When our banana went away, we replaced it with CBI. CBI is likely to go away come 2028 based on the EU positions, because they've said it quite clear. We're not going to, we didn't even discuss what was the reasoning and the rationale why these people wanted Dominican citizenship, which was to be able to get easy access into the EU and Shanghai countries. That was the underlying reason why they have a Dominican passport. Now, as you know, that is no longer there. A Dominican cannot now easily migrate to Europe without having go through all that visa requirement. The same for the US. As we speak now, the temporary ban, if that's what it was up to June 30th. We're now in July. I haven't heard anything coming out of the government. What is the status right now? Have they extended it past 30th June? Is it for another 6 months? Is it suspended? You have several young Dominicans who are unable to come up to the US to study because they can't get a student visa. You have people who want to visit their families. They can't get visas because there is a ban. Canada has some restrictions on us as well. So you see the dilemma. Not only that, we will have an economy that will be very, challenged and depressed, but where even young people might say, you know what, let me see if I can run out for a while and take a breather. They can't go to Europe. They can't go to US. They can't go in as easily, I would put it, as they would like to. Mm-hmm. And the final thing I will say is that in terms of the economy of the Ford Islands, St. Kitts, although they're depending heavily on the CBI, as I indicated earlier, they seem to have a much better thriving tourism industry than we have. They also have their international airport that creates easy in and out for them. Antigua seems to have a much better thriving tourism industry as well, and so is Grenada and St. Lucia. So we are the only one now in not as advanced as we would have liked to. What's going to happen to the completion of the international airport? Your guess is as best as mine, because if it was being funded by CBI and CBI revenue is drying up, now bear in mind, again, using the analogy that I use of the car, you're giving your son a car. We can very well have the international airport completed and finished and everything run with building, terminal, the whole 9 yards. But the airport has to be maintained. The lights have to be running, the electricity, the staffing, supplies, the whole 9 yards. So Even if we have the airport complete, but our revenue base is not sufficient to allow us the monies needed to provide the upkeep and maintenance and supplies for the airport, we're in a problem. We're in a serious problem. It's like having a BMW and you can't drive it because you can't afford to pay for the parts when it breaks down.
Yeah,
You
for to
can't
put
take it in
gas in
for
the car.
servicing.
Yeah.
You can't put gas in it. You know, so we are really in a really messed up situation, I must say. Um, and I think this guys, quite frankly, like you said, Tony, the people of the region need to take their business more seriously because it's their business. These people are there representing them and acting on their behalf. They need to take their business more seriously. And I would hope that Dominicans themselves would take their business more seriously. Because as I said, when the government is unable to generate the revenue needed to meet the payments for the goods and services that it provides, the people are going to suffer. Absolutely, the people. We have a debt, as I said right now, of a 1.6 thereabout $billion. Our debt to GDP ratio is somewhere around 90 something percent. Debt to GDP ratio, somewhere in that region, around 90% thereabout. We're one of the highest among the islands as well. The OECS have a benchmark of 60%. The OECS have a benchmark. The union has a benchmark within the OECD of 60%. So your debt to GDP ratio should not be no more than 60%. We are way above that. If in the absence of a CBI, how do you foresee us dropping that from the 90 that we are to a 60 when we have a 1.6 billion dollars in public debt? The government is owing the National Bank. They borrowed from the National Bank. The last numbers I saw was somewhere in the region of about $400 million thereabout owed to the National Bank. Because again, bear in mind, when you had several banks on the island, you had Barclays Bank, you had Royal Bank, you had National Bank, you had various banks. When government wants to borrow and they want money, to float their overdraft, which every government did. Eugenia did it. The Addison James administration did it. You'd go to the bank and you'd say to the bank, you take some borrowing to float your overdraft. So month end coming, you want some money to pay your civil servants or whatever. You would take a certain amount from Barclays and a certain amount from Royal and maybe National Bank. So you spread it out. So no one institution is carrying the load. In the absence now of a Royal Bank or Barclays Bank, the only major bank there that's carrying that load is National Bank. So National Bank right now is carrying close to $400 million in
Government debt.
debt, yes, to government. And most of that, I'm sure, is overdraft and some other borrowing they did for various projects. So all of that makes up that $1.6 billion that will not be able to service when the revenue itself is not coming in from CBI. So you see the quagmire that we're in. You see what we're in? So the people of the region, and in particular Dominicans, need to take hold of their lives, their country, and do what it takes to change from where we are. The EU is not going to come and save us, period. Forget it. You're not going to go to the negotiation table, to the engagement table, and don't have anything to show and expect the EU is going to say, okay, we're going to give you X amount of money. Yeah, they will still continue to support one or two various projects here and there. But in terms of your recurrent expenditure, they're not going to support that for you. You
No,
have
they're
to
not.
determine
The
how you're going to support
EU
it.
not going to be investing anywhere close to $1 billion in the sub-region per annum at all.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. And that is
even
what the
if yeah,
CBI collectively was generating among the
it's
five
generating.
countries.
So if that's what they're looking to replace, they need to get more creative. So Alvin, we're pretty much at the end of the time. So I want to thank you. As usual, you came very prepared. You had your documents, you had your documentation, and you laid it out quite clearly for everyone to see. I hope the people who are tuning can start to think about it, because life in the Caribbean is not a bed of roses right now. Imagine when that revenue generating activity goes away. I'll go look at that article and read the entire article, because I don't know if the OECS heads came up with any kind of plan, specific plan, that they can go to the EU to see if they could appease them and say, these are the things that we have been doing to meet your demands. This is what we continue to do. This is how we would scale it back, or be more transparent, so you can be more comfortable with the program. Because in life, it's supposed to be a negotiation. So they said that to you, they gave you 2 years. So you should be able to say, this is what we're going to do. And you'll tell us if that gives you more comfort, so you can remove that hammer over our heads. Because if we say we are independent, those are the type of independent thoughts and activities that we need. We don't need to be just cowering and say, okay, okay, if you said we're going to stop, but in the meantime, you have to help show us how to get some money so we can feed our people and we can provide health care and so on. So, folks, I hope that you understood, well, not just understand, but that you're more aware of what's happening, what's coming, and that we can all start to apply our minds collectively as to what actions we can take. Can we as individuals come together and raise a couple $1 million and do a water project in Dominica in spite of the government? Can we come together and raise some money to buy a cargo ship that can take agricultural produce from Dominica and take it to the other islands where it's required? How are we going to say, okay, we have this happening, well, this is what we can do? And out of those activities, we will start to get a better government, because the people are starting to do better, and governments are a reflection of the people. So my encouragement is to, one, I'm going to say it every time, if you have not reconfirmed to be a voter, go and register so you can vote in the next election, because your vote becomes critical. If you're not satisfied with the way the current administration is responding, first of all, they have not. If it wasn't for Gaston Brown in Antigua, we would not know about that communication. But they managed to bring all the prime ministers into Dominica to have a meeting about it, but they have not seen it fit to come to the people and say, like, don't wait until the day before, like they did with Ross University. The day before, Ross pulled out, oh, as a heads up, the CBI is closing tomorrow. Where is that sense of accountability to the people? Uh, we don't matter, we don't count. You bring all the prime ministers to Dominica to have a meeting, but you've not even done a press conference. You've not done a press release. You've not said anything about the CBI program to the people of Dominica who are going to be affected by the issue. So we need to demand a little more respect. We need to demand a lot more accountability, and let us see how we can vision our our country and our region 5 years, 10 years out. What type of healthcare system, quality of health, education, employment, what type of industries we want to see, what type of land ownership we want to see in our country. Are we going to be so broke that folks can come from wherever and buy the land from under us? Or can't we look at where we can generate some resources and we can show up our ownership? Because if we continue the way we are continuing, the land is not going to belong to us anymore. It's going to belong to folks who are not from the region, who just have enough money and want to come down and play golf, or have a place where they can go on their yacht or run away from winter. And ourselves as Caribbean people, our heritage is going to slowly disappear and dwindle. So, so Alvin, that's
Yeah,
me. I don't know if you
yeah.
want to
No,
add any additional comments,
no,
but we're
no.
going to wrap it up.
Yeah, no, Tony, you're right. I mean, you made a very important comment there in your closing remarks, and that is suggesting that the heads had that important meeting in a hush hush manner behind closed doors. One would have expected that a meeting of that nature, where you're discussing the affairs of the people of the region, the CBI belongs to the people. It's not your private company that you have, and the board of directors of that private company decide to have a meeting in Dominica. You're discussing the people's business. Why didn't they feel it transparent enough to have a media discussion with the media,
Hmm.
where the heads of government met in Dominica, and you give an hour, 2 hours to the media to speak to them about the program, what you discuss, and the outcome? They didn't do that. As far as I'm aware, there was never a press conference with the media people in Dominica where they were invited in and where they had an opportunity to ask questions of the prime ministers as it relates to the CBI. That, to my mind, would have been a good thing to do, and to show a certain level of transparency, and the fact that, yeah, here we are discussing this thing on your behalf, and this is where we have arrived, and give the media. That is the role. That is where the media is the voice of the people. That's what the media is in the region. The media represents the people. It's the voice of the people. So you would have had an opportunity where the voice of the people can ask some direct questions to the prime minister as it relates to the program. And they in turn could indicate to the media the nature of the discussion that was held, and share with them their own perspective and how important they see it and that type of thing. But it was all done in closed doors, in a hush hush, um, kind of, as they would say in Creole, they're Soviet, you know.
Hmm.
So people only hear about it, and then after that they issue a statement, which, as I said, is very empty. But
Very
Tony, again,
lackluster.
thanks for the opportunity. As always, it's a pleasure to join you in those conversations. And like I said, it's just to bring my perspective, a different perspective to the dialogue, and hopefully folks will understand what's going on. They will get the information, one, yes, but also act on the information. If we do not take action in some shape or the other, and you send the call for people to get confirmed in Dominica's case, please go out and confirm and register, because obviously there is a pending election to take place. And if you want to see something different from what we now have in terms of the leadership of the country, and where you want to see your country 2 years from now, as we celebrate our 50th anniversary and is likely to lose the CBI, then you have that responsibility. First, get confirmed,
So Alvin,
registered, go out and vote. So thanks again, Tony, and as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you to you and your
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
and your listeners. Sorry, your listeners.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you, Alvin, and of course the audience. Thank you for staying with us. We stayed hour and a half, but I think it was important to have that extended program where you can actually see what is involved, what has been done with the program to date, and now that we have this looming sunset, what can we do about it? It's never too late. What can we do about it? Again, I will reiterate, elections have consequences. If you don't register and get yourself on the voters list, when the election is called, you don't have the option to vote. So even if you think you may not or you're unlikely to vote, I would encourage you to go and register, because when the election is called, you can always exercise your right not to vote. But let us say there's stuff that's going on that affects you. You have nobody knows what's happening next week, and you may have something happen to you personally, or you may become passionate about something, and you say, "Boy, I am going to participate in the election." If you did not get on the list, you don't have the option to change your mind and to go to vote. So, folks, good night. Thank you for staying on. Thank you to my guest, Mr. Alvin Thomas, for joining us. I think we had a wonderful conversation. I hope you agree. And let's keep our eyes on this program. Let's see if the governments are going to come and make a public statement to their people informing them of what is going on and what their plans are to mitigate, to lessen, to buffer the hit that our fellow Caribbean citizens can get from losing such a program. So, folks, good night. We'll do this again next week, Wednesday, with another episode of This Week in Interview. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.